right. We got things going on over there.
Yeah, it's just my,
Just get a decision tree on there. Like, if they ask me this, I'm going that way. If they ask me that, I'm going this way.
no, I don't do that well prepared, but thank you for the idea.
Flow chart.
Jeez,
Right.
that's a good
She's
idea.
flow charting the podcast.
Yeah.
Good to know.
It's my mind map, and
All right,
yeah.
let's get this show on the road.
Ready when you are, sir.
Muted.
Oh, we're good now. It looked muted for a second. That is a
think we're
sweet
good.
intro right there. Let's do it that.
Jeez.
Let's just keep that.
Whoa.
Tyler, there's somebody muted. That's the name of the podcast from now on.
I think he meant to mute you.
It's for the intro.
Yeah. Episode 9. Someone's muted. Here we go.
Oh,
Why not just start that way? All right. It's Pickers Podcast. Here we go. We got Tyler, as always.
Yep.
Lisa, you joined
Yeah.
us back again. Thank you for gassing up the private
Yeah.
plane to
Not yet.
showing up when you
But,
can.
Yeah, I cannot believe you're giving me a microphone again. So
Why
thank
not?
you for having me back.
No, we love it. We love it. And then, Cato's in the house again.
Back in.
You can't see behind Tyler, there's a couch, and I think that's where Gangl slept, so that we made sure to get him on this time around.
It's a good sleeper, by the way.
Oh, solid. Is it a pullout or
No.
Oh no, you just straight do it.
Yeah.
It is actually pretty comfy. I was sitting on it before.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe we get one of those, stick mics, and we just have Gangl, when he's sleeping over there, we just like wake him up on one of these.
We can do couch reviews pretty soon. I can give you all.
Oh,
the
there you
updates.
go. Well, you and your 97 Costco trips, I'm sure you've sat on every one of the couches that jumped in the front of there.
We can do some snoring of Keith for the next intro.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Well, anything will be better than Tyler. Your mic is
Yeah.
muted. All right, let's get going here. So, hot button topic, FOMC meeting, which Fed Open Market Committee, for those who don't care about what FOMC means. From every indication right now is they're not going to do anything, right? So, Tyler, why do we care about these things?
Well, I mean, the Fed sets the monetary policy, and this is where they set the interest rates, the Fed funds rate, which dictates the rest of the interest rates for the most part. Obviously, some difference on the long end of the interest rate curve. But, what they have done after now, as well as the press conference, to give you a sense of where are the other members of the FOMC, where are their heads at on the overall economy, right? So I think from that perspective, we care. From the perspective of today's meeting, I think it's important for the rhetoric of what Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, is going to say to set the tone for if they can cut rates at some point this year.
Gotcha.
I think prior to the election. I think December, they could do it if they wanted to or not, but you have the election in November. So I think my opinion of why this one is important is Powell has to set the stage of saying, we are planning to cut rates at some point before the election, or maybe not that specific.
Yeah, no, I'd be surprised
not
if
gonna-
he came
he's not
out.
gonna be that
They don't throw
specific,
darts.
but-
They usually pump
But
shotguns.
I think if all of a sudden in the next meeting in July or in September, they say, yeah, we're going to cut rates, I think it's going to be a shock because all of a sudden it becomes a political story.
Sure.
So I think this is kind of the meeting for him to set that stage, and how he frames it, who knows, but he has to say something of that nature to allow them to cut before the election, I guess, in November.
Gotcha.
That's why I think this one's important.
Okay, that makes sense. Gangl, we got a CPI number today. By the time we got it this morning.
Yep.
So inflation was a little cooler than expected. That 0.1. That means everything to the world, apparently.
That's what we talked about a couple weeks ago. You mentioned that.
Is that
0.1? It makes
Yeah,
a difference.
that 0.1 is it's world beating or world ending, one of the two. So from your side, does it change what he talks about today?
I think it gives ammunition a little bit to be a little bit more on the dovish side of things, but personally, I don't think it changes that. Expectations for overall CPI to be at 3.4, it came at, to your point, 3.3.
Yeah.
So a little bit less. So I don't know. The market's excited about it, right? Because I mean, at least
At least it's going the right way.
going the right direction, right? So if you go back a couple months ago, there was fears that they were going to, inflation was getting out of control and they actually gonna start raising rates again. I think that's now off the table with a print like this. So I think directionally, but I still think it's going to be sticky. I mean, if you just go back last Friday when we had a strong, jobs market number, the bond market went the other way. So it's now today it's kind of reversing what it did on Friday. So I don't think they changed their mind, but I do think it adds to the case of cutting. And I'm still in the camp of, the consensus expectations is 1 to 2 cuts. And Tyler just mentioned that, if they want to do one before the election, then maybe they have to start signaling that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they do that. So we'll see. I'm still more in the 0 to 1 camp, and with the 0 even being a strong possibility. So again, a lot of it's data dependent. Today's data did point to a possibility or opens the door a little more.
But I just think that the Fed has to do something because, well, not something, but they have to set the stage because they can't just shock the market. I mean, I think if they cut rates, the market's going to rip. So I don't think they really care if it shocks to that direction. Whereas if they raised rates all of a sudden, I think it's going to be a shock to the market the other direction. So maybe they don't care if they signal because they know that the market's going to appreciate a cut. I don't know.
Yeah, I just don't know if they have to signal this meeting, which I get the reason why if you're worried about the election. I do think that they do want to see not to do anything right in front of the election. So that kind of, we've got 2 more after today's meeting, right? That's what we're kind of talking about.
Well, then they got
meeting.
one like the day
July,
after, right?
September, and then the November meeting is literally the day after, I think, the election.
So with this data, I think you could wait till the next meeting, which is in July, and then maybe do that signaling that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need to do it too in advance, but I get where you're going with that though.
Gotcha. Lisa,
Yep.
So as Tyler said, a lot of what they pay attention to is not just the meeting and what happens, but what they talk about afterwards.
Right.
There are a lot of Fed governors and there's voting, non-voting, all that. Do you think there's too much commentary from the Fed? Do you think there's enough? Do you think, where do you think we sit on how we know what they're thinking?
I think overall, and the way like their commentary gets dissected word by word every time, I think overall it's an overkill.
Yeah.
Because what's the point of this? To really pay so much attention to every Fed governor in that detail? Does it really make a difference?
Yeah.
I think it's an overkill, and it's overall just, adds just too much layer of complexity than it actually is.
Well,
I think it's much simpler than it actually, but investors sometimes make out of it.
Well, then you get the cross pollination of some of them are more dovish, some of them are hawkish, and it's like, is there a direction here? I mean, is it worthwhile to hear from them if they have completely opposing views? Now, granted, they should be able to say what they want, whatever they want to do, but to dissect that into a market sentiment just seems crazy to me.
What I think is interesting though, this go around with Powell is usually we have the dot plots, right? Everybody talks about these dot plots where they plot out their expectations for interest rates over the next meeting, year, 2 years, and then long term, right? It's interesting because usually there's a big dispersion. Like whoever is a hawkish president is going to be way up on the dot plot, right? Whereas all of the meetings post COVID, they've all been pretty much in line with each other. So I don't know what that tells you, or if it's just something that Powell is good at of collaboration, of saying you're hawkish, you're dovish, but how do we get to a middle ground?
Where's the middle ground?
So I don't know if that's the case, or if there's just something that they're trying to signal to the market that they are standing together versus trying to be against each other on where they think things should go. I don't know. That's also something.
Maybe part of it is the dissection of it that Lisa was talking about, right? Is that, hey, we kind of got to show a little bit of a unified stance to a certain extent, is that, because you see any Fed governor commentary that goes away from the grain and all of a sudden it's 2 days worth of news, right? So maybe that's what it is. Maybe they've just gotten from that perspective and just saying it's just too much. Let's figure out where the middle ground is and kind of go around there. Unless you have an absolutely crazy stance, which let's do that behind the scenes.
Let's hammer that out in the meeting before we get to the actual commentary.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, this kind of dovetails into our nerding out segment. Lisa wrote a piece released, right? It's released in the
it's
wild
released,
now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nice.
About an inverted yield curve. And I'm going to let her have the absolute pleasure of telling people what an inverted yield curve is and why it matters. Well,
Okay.
you
I-
take the stage on this
I might
one.
have to go find that couch.
Right. Thank you, Jeremy, because I will be known as the most boring podcast guest ever here. So the inverted yield curve, why I took this this topic for this market reflection, because I think as of now, we are historically the longest period, the longest stretch of an inverted yield curve at all, ever. And it is said that the yield curve, or its inversion, is predicting and preceding recessions. And up from time of inversion, it takes some time, around between 7 months and 2 years until a recession actually arrives. And I think since the 1950s, it predicted all but one recession, right? At least preceded all but one recession. So it was said to be very reliable and very right. So I took a closer look in that, why this time it's maybe different. Because we are actually having 2 years of inverted yield curve, and there is no recession on the horizon whatsoever, right? Economy is doing good.
Yeah.
At least nothing weird happens. We will probably not have a recession around the corner. And I think overall what my takeaway was, like, something that is so complex to forecast and to predict, like the economy. And we see, like, investors and especially economists have so much, different opinions, problems to predict it to be right. Why do we rely on just one predictor to kind of tell us where we are when it's so much more complex, right? And that it's generally wrong to kind of rely on one predictor like the yield curve, which can be wrong, right? Which we see now. It's obviously not really a good predictor this time.
No, certainly not. I mean, well, 400. I love the prediction of 7 months to 2 years. It's like really throwing darts there, aren't you?
Yeah, right.
So, from that, I mean, Gangl, you and I have done this for a while. Like, yield curve predictions and just general, like, forecasting mechanisms for that. I mean, I always say that, you can back test data into whatever you want. Does the yield curve actually do anything that tells us anything, or is it just a symptom of another thing?
I think it's just a symptom of another thing. So, excuse me. I get a drink here.
Do that. Yeah. Well, really got you on the yield. You were.
I was highly entertaining. So, no, I think it's a symptom of other things, right? Obviously, it's when, the Fed's raising rates, quickly, like they've done. All of a sudden, the short-term rates go above the long-term rates. Everybody's worried about a recession happening. Obviously, we're over 2 years now. And so at some point in time, we will get a recession. So maybe that stat's going to change from 7 months to whenever that is,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's 3 years.
Maybe let's just keep pumping that further down the road.
So that's why, to your question, I do think, anyway, we do pay attention to these, anecdotal pieces of evidence on things, but how predictive it is, I think it's not that predictive. But again, it's supposedly happen every time we get a recession. But I do think that time frame is stretching out to your point of 7 to 24. That's a big time period, right? It's not like it's like 7 months and all of a sudden 2 months later we're in a recession. That's not the case.
We're going to predict a recession in 2 years. It's like, that's okay.
Because recessions, I mean, what's the normal time before recessions? It's like 5 to 7 years. So anytime you start preceding, that time frame, you're bound to run into a recession.
Well, and you're just coming out of recession for like a bit of that time frame. So your 2 years is basically like 3 years worth of normalized curve anyway. So
I think to Keith's point, it's anecdotal because it's, when you think of a typical business cycle, right? The Federal Reserve uses the short end of the interest rate curve to control the how fast our economy is growing, right? So if the economy is growing extremely fast, they don't want it to overheat. So what does the Federal Reserve do? They raise interest rates, right? Which puts the shorter end interest rates more in line with longer end. If you start to get concerned about late stage economic cycle, people start to pile into the longer term interest rate curves, like the 10-year treasury, the 30-year treasury. More demand for treasuries pushes the yield down. So all of a sudden you have a high short term and a push down low term, which creates that inversion. I think it's just more of the traditional business cycle, not necessarily predicting the recession. It's
Yeah.
just
Yep.
we think the business cycle or the economic cycle is starting to come to a close, and that's just the natural progression of the interest rate curve.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's not a predictor. It's just what's going on in the economy.
Well, that's what I want. Longer rates are much more economic sentiment, right?
Yep.
For at the end of the day. So investors are going to move those rates much more quickly than the Fed is probably going to take action on, right? Because the Fed, as we just talked about before, the Fed kind of wants to see the writing on the wall. They're not going to move aggressively ahead until they see things. But, if people are looking ahead, they'll maybe play that through the long end rates and saying, I'm going to transition to some treasuries because I think things are negative on the horizon. I got a poll for you all here. Give me how we uninvert. Does the short end come down or does the long end go up? How do we get this thing uninverted? Tyler, I'm gonna start with you since
he's a fixed income guru.
Since he seems the most nervous about answering, he's going first.
Well, I was on the wrong end of that call this morning.
Gotcha. Always
that's
fun.
why I was nervous about that question.
Always fun to strike a raw nerve there.
Yeah. So that one hurts. But my initial thought is, the 10-year treasury, I would expect it to bounce around between 4.2 and 5, somewhere in there.
Yep.
So, I think right now we're at the lower end today. Today we're at 4.3% on the 10-year. If we start to get interest rate cuts, I think that's how you normalize. I don't foresee the 10-year going back down to the 1% it was back in COVID times, right? I just think that we're at a more neutral rate right now. I mean, the 30-year average and even longer term average of the 10-year U.S. Treasury is 4.5%. So we're kind of right in line with that. So I don't see it necessarily going lower or too much higher. I think you normalize by the Federal Reserve in the next year to 2 years, taking interest rates down. Again, we don't think that there's going to be too many today. We're at 5.25% to 5.5%. If they do 2 rate cuts, it gets you that 4.75 to 5, and then maybe 3 more next year.
Yep,
gets you uninverted.
So you see 2024 as being an inverted year, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Unless if there's something that nobody sees,
something changes,
some black swan event that smacks us in the face, and the Federal Reserve cuts rates to 0.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Lisa, how do we uninvert?
Good question. I mean, I generally agree with Tyler, I think. And there's a fact that we are already less inverted than last year. So it's already not so doom and gloom anymore. So I generally agree that we probably not get out of an inversion this year, but by next year,
Okay.
Yeah.
Gangl, you got a different take?
No, fairly similar. I mean, I think the 10-year treasury, Tyler and I have had this debate a little bit. I think it's going to be a little lower than that, that 4.2. I think it could go into that.
What did we start the year? 3.8?
3.8.
Yeah, I think we can get, that's kind of my bottom end at 3.8 to 4.75. So now we're right in the middle of it. I think that comes down a little bit. You get a couple, the cuts going, and I think that's how we eventually get out of it.
Okay.
Out of this timing, I'm not sure. I mean, these guys are saying end of, going into next year, that price feels about right, but who knows if something happens, economically. You look how much the yields are moved today and last Friday. I mean, they're jumping by 15 basis points. That's a lot. I mean,
fast it moves.
I mean, talk about our age, Jeremy, you and I remember, looking at bonds. They never moved more than a basis.
5 basis points was like a big day. Now it's just
it's
whatever.
like, whoa, okay, it's completely different.
It's so crazy. Yeah, I mean, I generally agree with you guys. It would be weird for me to see 10-year rates get to where short-term rates are right now. Over 5 would be something different has happened that I'm not aware of. And then on the other side, I don't see a massive amount of cuts unless something we're not aware of. I think the general progression is we're going to be inverted the rest of the year. Short rates are probably stable to slightly down. Long rates probably range bound, but jumping around like that, it's so I think that's generally where we are. We'll see what happens. Economic trends are kind of resilient. I wouldn't say they're accelerating. I wouldn't say they're massively decelerating. So range bound seems right to me.
Yeah. The other thing that I don't think a lot of people know about is there's a lot of maybe a lot of people do know about this, but there's a lot of foreign investment in treasury bonds, which can move yields.
Absolutely.
And also pension funds and banks for that matter too. So one thing that we've started to get some data on is there's not as many international countries buying U.S. Treasury bonds right now, and Japan has historically been a significant buyer of U.S. Treasuries. They aren't buying as much, And when there's less demand, yields go higher because the U.S. government has to entice people to buy treasuries for whatever reason, right? So I think that also keeps a floor on where interest rates go on the longer end.
Gotcha.
So that's part of my thesis, why Keith and I kind of bandy about where that range is, and we're talking basis points here. So it's not
we're in line at just a little bit of.
But that's why I think my floor is probably a little bit higher than his. Is I think there's less foreign buyers right now, which will keep the floor on interest rates going too much lower. But
cool.
I could be wrong.
Cool.
Just a fun fact before we move on.
Ooh, fun facts on inverted yield curves.
Yield curve,
airplanes,
rates. No,
couches. No,
not yet. Not yet. Too many good stories. No, but the ECB just lowered interest rates.
Sure.
And I think fun fact here is, I think it was the first time before they did it. Before the Fed did it.
Oh, okay.
Because it was always like when I still lived in Europe, it was always like a running joke is like, oh, we do not really need their commentary. We just need to know what the Fed is doing.
And then we know,
suit. And then we will follow, right? Because it's always the same, right? And this was actually the first time.
Look at that.
Like,
yes.
Actually, Bank of Canada did cut before.
Right, yeah.
So maybe that gave them the...
Yeah, they gave him the...
okay,
North
America's doing something.
Yes.
Let's go. Good. Thanks for that. All right, we're going to switch here. Old versus younger. Well, yeah, I was getting yelled at about changing it to younger. It was
no longer young.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
Obviously not.
A little sensitive over there.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Experience will teach you to not be so sensitive about that stuff. I want to talk about the Apple Developer Conference. It just happened. So the old this side of the table here, we were investing during iPhone and iPad intros, which seemed, even at the time, it seemed revolutionary, right? You just saw, I mean, Steve Jobs came out and we had never seen that before, right? I mean, the iPhone just changed pretty much everything. Days were dedicated to figuring these things out. Now we just had one, and you and I were making fun of Tyler. He was watching.
I watch him. Yeah.
No one, or our day, we had to spend. You had to like prep for it, right? You had to prep for it. Then we had the terrible live feeds because the technology wasn't quite there yet.
Yeah.
Cut in and out.
Yeah. So
what did he say?
What do you find some blogger trying to repeat what they
exactly. Some rando blogger that's just sitting there that can type the fastest to get it out there on the little ticker feed. Yeah. So did you two ever see that level of kind of detail or something that blew your hair back from Apple's development or changes? No.
I mean,
are we talking specifically this year?
No. In general, over the last, let's even say 5-6 years.
I mean, I think a big one was the watch.
Okay.
I think that was a big one for Apple, and now it's a significant portion of their business, right? The wearables.
Yeah.
I think that was probably the last big one, if you will.
Yeah. What's the headset thing called? Or the
Vision Pro.
Mm-hmm. When was that introduced?
Last year.
Was that at the developer conference?
Yeah, a little over.
No, that was fall. Well, last year.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
it's kind of has their foray into that, so I think hasn't done anything yet.
Right.
It seems
like
it's more on
$3,500.
$3,500 is more on seems like it's more on the commercial training side of things, and they still haven't quite figured that. And people haven't got excited about it yet.
I think the hype was there when they were announcing it, and then all of a sudden they announced the price, and then it just took everything out of the room because you have the Oculus at what is it, like $500?
It's certainly not $3,500.
No, it's
like $500 or something, right? So like all of a sudden you go from your competitors at $5,000 and you're at $3,500. I think it just sucked the excitement out of the room when they said that.
Have anybody put one on? Vision Pro?
I've never put one on.
You? No.
I have an Oculus at home, but I've never put the Vision Pro on.
There you go.
I get a little dizzy. This is older versus younger segment.
Yeah. Just putting a pair of glasses on, reading glasses, gets them a little dizzy.
Exactly. So I got a question for the group then. What device, like what do we use right now that could be like we were talking about with the iPhone and iPad, where it just was completely revolutionary? Like what device now could do that? Like what are we using now that could be just completely changed to where it's like, it does, where it feels like it was prehistoric dinosaur stuff that that the next wave is. Lisa, do you have one?
I think especially maybe not really one device,
Mhm.
but especially in the home,
Yeah.
like in the smart home area.
Yeah.
And I think what got a little bit left behind was like appliances. I know it's pretty boring, but like all the different appliances we have.
What, do you
And
want to put your dishes away for you?
no, but
Fold your laundry like Tyler was telling us last
in
week.
the end,
Ooh.
yes, Tyler.
Yeah,
That's how
right?
where you're going, hopefully. No, but when you also like hair drying or whatever, like with the cables and stuff and everything is complicated, I think there can be a lot done in within the home.
Okay.
That you just make things easier. And also when it comes to the wearables, for example, like the Apple Watch, Garmin watches, did I throw Garmin in there as well? A little bit biased
Sponsored
here.
by-
Shameless plug.
But especially in the watch area or wearable area, I think there can be a lot done when it comes to health, better watching the health,
Yeah.
making their sensors better to kind of keep track of your oxygen levels and
Yeah.
all blood pressure and all that stuff.
Whoop.
I think there needs a lot to be. I think there can be done a lot more.
Mhm.
So it's more like features and not really a special device, I
Yeah.
would say, to
Yeah.
just make that better.
Tyler, you got one?
I would say phone.
Again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, in one of our first episodes, we talked about a company that is trying to revolutionize the phone, and basically you can just talk to it,
Mhm.
and it'll text out, it'll kind of do everything. It's just like a little wearable clip that you put on. So I think that's one interesting avenue, and it all is using AI to help you do all of this. So
Yeah.
the fact that Apple is just now kind of introducing it, and I don't know if we want to talk about this developer conference, but it's kind of a disappointment in my opinion for this year's phone.
And the stock is up like 12% since, which is a
Well,
whole other thing.
Another whole other
If you
issue.
want to go down that rabbit hole, I think it was because yes, this year's iOS application is not great.
Right.
Like
Nothing new,
what
exciting.
they
There's nothing new,
introduced
yeah.
for Siri is not revolutionary. Like,
Right.
It's going to help you organize your notifications.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, cool.
But I think it's the fact that they're down the path, and probably in a year. So not the 2025 or 2024 phone release. It'll be the 2025 phone release. That will be the big upgrade cycle, because then they'll have this new AI feature that will be the dramatic thing.
And obviously you need a bigger chipset, right? And that's the kind of the
Yeah.
push on them potentially getting higher
Yep.
margin, higher mixed dollar
So,
phones.
We'll see. But I think that was the reason for yesterday's price move, because the actual event was
It's kind of boring.
very disappointing. Because
For a guy that listened to it.
Right, exactly. Really, yeah.
like the features that they
Good.
announced, Android's had the features for like 3 years.
Okay.
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right. Well,
Anyways,
Apple
I
as a
think
me
phone-
too is
I think
an
the
interesting.
phone is my go-to choice of the next revolutionary thing.
Nice.
I think another thing, which is again maybe a device or whatever, it does not really affect everybody. But I think there, especially with AI and wearables and kind of, there can be a lot done with hearing aids, for example, or for help for visually impaired people.
Yeah.
I think that's a very big area with AI and wearables and advancement.
Yeah, Lisa,
can
I guess I would agree with you. I think
Mhm.
just generally health
Yeah.
is probably an
Yeah.
area where there could be significant differential
Yeah.
just with sensor technology
Yeah.
and the ability to anticipate rather than react.
Yep.
I think
Absolutely.
is
Mhm.
probably our
Well,
next
talking
wave.
about Apple, as we're talking about that, last year, remember you had sent me the article. Apple's working on, so for me, I'm type 1 diabetic. So Apple is working on a glucose monitor
Mhm.
built into their watch
Mhm.
that you don't have to insert anything into.
Yeah.
So it just reads it based off of your current blood with whatever technology they have. So like that, I think is super interesting.
Mhm.
And would be extremely helpful for me, because I don't have to insert anything into my body
Huge.
anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that's, to your point, that's also something that I think as they continue down this path of the technology about being able to read blood through your
Mhm.
wrist,
Mhm.
I think it's
Absolutely.
going to be very interesting.
Love it. Love it. All right. We're going to switch just for this little fun stuff here. Spaghetti wall. I need summer drink rankings. It's getting warm out there. We can have some fun now. I want to do overrated versus underrated. Keep it simple. Margaritas, overrated, underrated.
Underrated. I'm a big margarita guy.
Big margarita,
Underrated.
underrated.
Overrated.
Oh,
Gangl.
Keith.
That's just not my jam.
Frozen or iced on the margaritas?
Frozen. I love a good slushy.
Iced. I'm not a slushy fan.
I'm a slushy.
Oh.
You got a slushy
I'm
for
along
so
with this.
underrated. Frozen, underrated. Iced, actually overrated. So
I would agree with that.
I'm going both sides
Yeah.
of the fence on that one.
Wow.
Pina coladas, overrated, underrated. Overrated.
Oh, overrated,
Overrated.
for sure.
Underrated.
Underrated.
It reminds me. The
What is
smell
wrong with these
smell
two
reminds me
over
of the
there?
beach. It's like it's
Oh,
all
That
good.
is so
that's-
awful take from that
yeah.
side of the
That's
table over
terrible.
there.
You do that on purpose, Keith, to
No.
just have the
Massively.
opposite, like
No,
the youngsters.
Massively underrated.
I'm not a rum.
No,
Oh,
guy.
I'm
so
not
good.
like the whipped cream or the cream.
Yeah. Oh.
It's just
And you
too.
just get gut rot after.
Yeah.
No,
No,
it-
no.
it's all good.
Not making them right.
It gets
Not
nasty
making
pretty
them
quick.
right.
Even the smell reminds you of
Oh,
the
it's
beach.
phenomenal.
Come
It's
on.
phenomenal. Oh, yeah.
Mm.
All right. Seltzers.
As Keith is sitting in Elk River.
Hey,
Yeah.
you know,
I'm on a lake.
he's
so-
on a
On a
lake.
I got a little ad here. I don't know.
Seltzers, White Claws, Trulies, those kinds of things. Overrated, underrated.
That's tough because I mean those are my go-to.
Okay. That's the most standard one.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
So I would say, I guess I'd have to say.
You could say properly rated
Actually, I
if
would
you
probably
want.
say overrated just because there's so much hype around them. They're not like anything special.
But
Gotcha.
that's why you drink them all the time.
Yeah. The standard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tyler, I don't get
I don't know.
Lisa?
I do not really drink seltzers
Okay.
because of their soda in it.
Got
and
it.
I can't have it because I start crying when I drink soda
Oh,
too
no.
fast. It's like a weird
It's a
thing I
thing?
have. Yes, it is.
Wow.
That's
I never heard
unique.
that before.
Yeah, that's
Right?
that's a unique one.
So I do not really drink it, but I think it's overrated because there's so many types out there.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, it's just overwhelming.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think they're
Yeah,
they're a little overrated. I barely touch them.
Yeah, I used to drink some Claws, Truly's not so much. High Noon, I guess, is the one. If you put
Yeah,
that
I
in the
guess that's the
seltzer
one now,
camp,
yeah.
I kind of like those, but I generally like vodka. So
All right, give me the number one roster. What's going to be the most frequent in the summer from June to September? What is going to get used the most?
You're gonna laugh about this, but probably just tequila on the rocks.
Oh,
Oh,
okay, all right. George Clooney over there.
yeah, I like
No,
it.
I'm more of a rock. The Terramana.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know tequilas at all. They all taste like jet fuel to me.
Mm.
Lisa, give me.
Jeremy and I must
give
have
me
went to
an-
the same kind of
put it in
college
the
area.
plane right there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Fill it up.
See, yeah. Lisa,
Aperol spritz
Aperol
to
spritz.
put that in the mix.
That makes
Definitely,
perfect sense
that's
to me.
That
my
does.
go-to drink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a solid drink.
Yeah.
We'll go with the vodka lemonades. I mean, just
Mm,
that's a
that's
nice
good as
summer.
well. Nice
Yeah,
call.
whether it's lemonade, pink lemon, doesn't matter. Let's just mix it
any
up. in there.
lemonade,
Yeah.
I'm the most boring dude on the planet.
Beer.
A beer. Just give me a beer. I'll
Yeah.
be just fine. That's all I need. All right. I think we're going to call it a day. Thank you all for joining us. And I hope that went well. And we'll see you next week. All right.
Closures.
Oh, I knew they had the disclosures.
But who did that? Is it
I think
AI?
it's AI.
Oh, really? 'Cause it sounds like a decent